Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Nonprofit Show. We had to borrow from Shakespeare to merge or not to merge, whether it is more noble to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous misfortune. I mean, merging is a big topic, acquiring nonprofits, big topic. And so we've got big guests here today. Tim Davis, president and managing partner of Glick Davis and Associates, along with our dear friend Jeffrey R. Wilcox, CEO and founder of Interim Executives Academy. You might know him from Third Sector, but they've got a new and exciting brand. So thank you, gentlemen, for being here with us.
Thanks for having us, Julia.
It's going to be fun. It's a huge conversation. And we were talking in the green room, Jeffrey, weren't we, about we're going to be talking more about this because this is the time when we're starting to see this concept and this notion pick up. And so I'm really excited to get into this. I'm also very excited that we have these amazing partners that join us each and every day for the Nonprofit Show. They include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, and Fundraisers Friday. I'm Julia C. Patrick, CEO of the American Nonprofit Academy. So honored to be a part of this amazing and national co-host panel. Jeffrey R. Wilcox, we have enjoyed picking your brain, learning from you from pretty much almost like the first month that we started the Nonprofit Show 6 years ago. Pretty exciting. Talk to us about, I'm like, whew, talk to us about Interim Executives Academy, because this is very exciting.
Well, thank you, Julia. And I think we're talking about like 1,300 programs, and congratulations to you. As you've evolved, we've evolved. And what we have found is that teaching transitional leadership is an art, it's a science, it's a profession. And for some of us, we'd actually call it a calling. And the Academy has been an opportunity to bring together about 800 people that now have certificates on what transitional leadership in a methodical way can mean for nonprofits that are at a crossroads.
Holy cow. I mean, end the show right now, because that's amazing. I mean, we need this desperately. And you and I and members of your team, we've been talking about this amazing change of demographics. Leadership is changing, it's evolving. How do we look at these changes in a more strategic and intelligent way? And so I love how you're going to be part of this discussion so that we can understand how interim executive leadership, what it looks like. So Tim Davis, no pressure after we just sang, the praises of our friend Jeffrey Wilcox. Talk to us about Glick Davis.
Oh, thanks. And, we've had the pleasure of working next to Jeffrey for a long time as well, and always enjoy that experience. So Glick Davis and Associates, we've been around now. We are about to hit year 30, founded by my business partner, Jan Glick. And we focus on several things in the nonprofit space. We do mergers and acquisitions, which we're going to talk about today. We help with CEO and CFO placements. And we help with turnarounds as well. And actually, our founder, Jan Glick, not here today, but wrote the book on not-for-profit turnarounds, which led to some of this work in M&A. And again, appreciate you having us.
Wow. Over a 30-year period, and I know, Jeffrey, you have quite the legacy of leadership and thought leadership in the sector as well. Imagine the things that you have seen and how they've changed, and yet they probably stayed the same in some other ways. And so it's really an exciting time. I want to jump right into this and talk about how mergers and acquisitions can actually factor into future planning. I think a lot of times, and Jeffrey, I'll ask you and start with you. A lot of times we see this as like a crisis issue, but I think you're going to tell us that no, we can be more strategic.
Julia, I think you talk about a long period of time. We used to talk about, strategic planning, and now we talk about sustainability. And what's really interesting is to have a sustainability conversation, we have to first of all understand what that means. And the sustainable nonprofit is one that has the right combination between being impactful and being viable. And if you cannot be impactful and you cannot remain viable, you will not be sustainable. And what's interesting is I think for a lot of boards, there's some confusion between sustainability versus viability. And
Mhm.
there's also the word that we don't talk about, which is survivability. Now, I don't want to split hairs here, but I'll tell you, for organizations that are doing important work, we've evolved to the point where we have to say, what does it mean to be sustainable? In order to have that question answered, we have to first answer, to be sustainable, we have to be viable.
Right.
And in order for us to be viable, we have to be in a state that is not in one of survive. We have to be survivable.
Right.
So we've got to change the language about, if we really care about our mission statement, continuing to impact the quality of life in our communities, we have to step outside of ourselves and ask the question, how can this impact remain viable so
Mhm.
we can have a sustainable impact on our community? We've got to have merger and acquisition conversations, because at the end
Mhm.
of the day, it's about making sure we're impactful.
Right. Okay, so you just like kind of put my hair on fire. And so I'm got to think about this because Tim, I don't hear the word viable being used. What about you? When you're looking at the ecosystem, and it is a brilliant word because it distills so much down. What do you see when it comes to this?
Oh, I love the word. Jeffrey phrased it great in terms of viability, right? We hear so much about the short-term sustainability, about overcoming fundraising goals in the near term or the short term. But that's, the larger goal is to deliver an impact. And you can't deliver the impact when you're running hair on fire, just worried about remaining sustainable or even keeping your doors open for a few more months. You have to have a long-term viable plan, um, to be able to deliver that impact. We see that every day in our meetings.
So when we talk about that, then Tim, and we're thinking about a merger and acquisition, which scares the hell out of a lot of people, and they think of it as a super negative thing, like a desperation.
It does.
Talk to us about what might be involved and how we can reposition our own mindsets within our industry, because the for-profit sector has a different vibe when it comes to M&A.
They do have a different vibe, and I think that vibe has a bit of a negative connotation in the nonprofit space,
Yeah.
and it's not necessarily appropriate because M&A looks different in a nonprofit scenario than it does in a for-profit. Um, and there's to give you some small examples of groups we've worked with that have found a way to be viable with this. It's when they found a way to deliver to expand their mission, or to expand their mission to new areas, or to work with groups that have a very similar but maybe slightly different approach to the mission than they do. So we worked with a provider last year. Mission is delivering financial education in schools to children, specifically children that may not get financial literacy education at home or in their environment. Well, there was different groups in California, in Oregon, and Washington, all tied together loosely, but all separate groups, all applying to the same groups for grants, all asking the same philanthropists for fundraising. Um, and that the plan was to merge together. It gave them a little bit of operational efficiency, but it also made them stronger. And they went and started approaching these funders as one organization with much larger asks, rather than each group asking for 10,000 a year. They went and pitched, 100,000, 200,000 a year to these same, funders, and had a lot more success because they were able to talk about the larger impact they can deliver, the larger mission focus they could do, and how much more effective they were as a team, rather than one off, not directly competing, but competing for the same dollars essentially every year.
You know, when you tell that story, I'm sitting in the conference room where those conversations are going on. And I'm thinking that there are a lot of egos that have to be put aside in the effort of moving forward in a different way.
There are. The good thing, though, in the nonprofit space is you have a lot of mission focused people. It's what brings
Yeah.
people to this space, right? And I've done this in the for-profit space prior, and I've done this in the non-for-profit space. In the for-profit space, you've got egos pounding on the table to maximize their payout at the end of a deal like this, right?
Right.
And this is about who can impact or deliver more on the mission, or whose staff might be the best representative of the staff that could get it done. And when they're able to set that aside and they're able to plan ahead of time how they're going to work together, who's going to do what, and then you have the extra layer in nonprofits of the board members having to be involved as well. And, they each have a different plan for their organization and how they think it should be managed. Yeah, it takes a little bit more time to get through those conversations. It takes more bringing everyone together and building consensus. But you have a common theme to go from. No one's in this for the money. No one's taking home one big check at the end. We're all trying to make an impact. We're all trying to keep staff employed. We're all trying to see how we can better utilize the dollars and be more viable, not just sustainable. And that conversation does get through to everybody. Some egos have to be put aside, but it does get through.
Jeffrey, I'm thinking about the role of an interim leader and how maybe this is just like that perfect confluence of opportunity, because you're bringing in somebody that doesn't necessarily have the baggage, but they have the education to help navigate this type of a future. I mean, what are you seeing?
Well, we have to first of all begin why an interim is such a strategic decision for a nonprofit. And that lies in the idea that there is a bridge building between taking pride in our past and creating some faith in our future. And in that process, this is what we teach, Julia, is that if you're going to have any kind of hope, faith, trust, you check the word, but any kind of equity in your future, you have to have someone ask some tough questions. Maybe the way we have been doing it is not the way we should assume we should do it in the future.
Yeah.
What an interim does is help to get that assumption off the table and put on the table when we think about having a more viable, therefore sustainable future. What does that look like? That is a different conversation than should we merge?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, wow. And it makes me think it's not only a question, it's an education, because you're bringing forward thoughts that people may have never, ever thought of this. And I'm wondering what the two of you see in that. Like, how much time up front are you having to spend on just educating everybody as to what the opportunities in the process might be?
I'm happy to take that one.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I would say just the education process alone, when we get called by groups that are even considering it, there's a 30 to 60 day window that is just sitting down with the stakeholders, sitting down with the board members, sitting down with the leadership of both groups, both independently and together, and just talking about it, what it might look like, and how it might go, and what the process is going to be, and just answering questions and fears that may be preconceived or may be tied to the for-profit space before we ever move into documents or agreed upon structures. It takes that kind of time.
Wow. I mean, yeah, Jeffrey.
Well, and Julia, I think one of the marks of great interim leadership is you want to create an environment where reasonable people come to the conclusion that maybe a discussion of merger and acquisition is their idea, as opposed to an interim coming in and saying, you should be talking about this. Because when reasonable people are drawn to a similar conclusion, they own it. And then we start seeing real progress.
Yeah, I love that. And, I've got to believe that this is something that kind of probably leaks out into other areas within a community. We've talked about this, Jeffrey, just on the topic of interim leadership, that you go into a community and somebody has success with it, then they're going to be like, hey, another nonprofit, or you should try this. And I got to believe that if you start with a community that has success, it's just going to become a more logical, tangible option versus that first out, that nonprofit or those nonprofits that are the first to do it in a big way. And, everybody's watching to see how it's going to work out.
Well, I think it's the difference between a board that sees themselves as owners of a mission and boards that see themselves as stewards as a mission. Because giving up ownership and stepping forward with stewardship is two different kinds of responsibilities, and I would say ego boosters.
Yeah. That's kind of, cutting to the chase, isn't it, Jeffrey? I mean, trying to explain that. So talk to us about, Tim, what the secret sauce is, because we've already talked about time and we've talked about ego and viability and some of these things that are the foundation of making this decision. How do you carry it down the field and have it be successful?
This is probably several conversations worth of material. I'll try to summarize. But the secret sauce, there's a few, but the biggest one that we tell all of our clients is you have to take the time to build the culture between the two organizations. You can put as many hours as you want into strategic planning. You can analyze the financials left, right, and center. You can have people talk through all those org structure details and who's going to hold what position and what title. But unless you take the time to get the teams involved with each other, to do some of those efforts together. So one organization's not doing strategic planning for the other. One organization's not making decisions in a vacuum about plans and titles for the other. One board is not assuming, they're going to dictate board seats and decisions going forward. But all these decisions are made together over time. Both sides get a chance to be heard. Both sides get a chance to be seen. Both sides understand what the other wants to do and deliver and where they're coming from. Unless you really invest the time in that, it doesn't really work in the end. One side's always unhappy. So.
Okay, you know what? Not what I thought you were going to say. Which is very exciting because I love that you've given me something else to think about in a different lens. Jeffrey, you probably would agree, and you probably knew that was the answer, that it's culture first. How do you see this? Because you're talking about cultural shifts a lot of times with a change of leadership, and especially the employment of or placement of interim leadership.
Well, it is all about culture, but I will say also, I think that there is a role that a lot of us who make decisions about organizations cannot assume we have enough information to make good decisions. I think you would be, I think all of us would be shocked at the number of people who are making decisions for organizations who don't realize how insolvent their organization really is. They don't realize how much they have on paper that's not liquid. They don't realize how much cash reserve they really need in today's political and social environment in order to remain viable. It is about culture, but I think it is a culture of curiosity. It's a culture of being empowered by what I don't know instead of defending what I do. And that's where we as change agents in the nonprofit sector have to change the language, change the conversation, and make merger and acquisition a solution instead of a sentence.
Right. I love that. A solution instead of a sentence. Because I've got to believe there's such, a tremendous amount of fear. And to Tim's point, spending a good 60 days of really discussing and bringing these people to the table before you move forward, that's pretty intense.
It is. Can I also can I build on one of Jeffrey's comments about insolvency real quick? We talked about the secret sauce, what I think makes it work. And I do think, unfortunately, most organizations that start considering this, it's because they've reached insolvency. And what I wish organizations would realize, and Jeffrey was saying it, once you've reached that point, you aren't bringing a value to a future partner or a future organization. You still may feel a value, you still may feel tied to a mission, but now you're asking someone to take on your risks and liabilities and debts and basically inherit a problem rather than when you might have still been strong enough a year or two before to bring your staff, to bring your team, to bring your mission around when it was starting down that path and save it, rather than at the end. We get a lot of calls from folks that are on fire, and that's one of the hardest conversations, is to say, unfortunately, no one wants to pick up, light their own hand on fire, by picking up yours. And I wish I could get that message across to more people faster.
So, rubbing the crystal ball that sits, it lives rent free in my head, as they say. I've got to believe that we are marching towards a time where you're going to be getting more of those calls. That this crippling of funding and shift in the way the federal government supports nonprofits is going to really push people out.
I believe so. And to be frank, the calls have started to come a little bit. We saw this, and Jan and I put together a white paper several years ago about the effects after the 08-09 recession and the rise in that activity. Everything's lining up in a similar pattern here. I think we're going to see the same things happen. People that survived off COVID funding and extensions over the last few years, that's dried up and gone away. And along with the tightening strings from the federal funding, I unfortunately think this is going to be part of, and needs to be part of, a lot of strategic conversations for organizations now for the next few years. Right.
So then, Jeffrey, we have this interesting time in shift just because of our demographics. An aging population or CEO level population. The only time that we can figure out that 4 generations of Americans have all been in the workforce at the same time, that top end is leaving. The draw towards getting, this interim approach becoming more of a logical use, right? So then how do we bring those leaders in and then think about the M&A environment? Because I got to believe it could be a shock to several organizations if their interim comes back to them and says, hey guys, I think a new strategy might be M&A.
So again, I will emphasize, I think we have so many great interim leaders in this country right now. And I think what we're learning is that what we facilitate is what happens. What we dictate won't.
Okay.
And so what we have to do is we have to put a facilitative process that leads reasonable people to conclusions that they should be talking about M&A before they have to talk about M&A. And the only way we can do that is make sure that interim leadership is providing reasonable people with good information to make reasonable decisions. And in today's volatile environment, one of the first things an interim has to do is make sure, does everybody have the information they need for this organization to go in the direction it should? And then we'll figure out what that could be. And Julia, the truth is, it may be we need co-directors instead of one director. It may be we need to have a shift in our mission because of shift in society. And it may be, while we're still a good potential partner, we need to shop around and be a viable product that someone wants to buy before we're a bankrupt product that no one will. That's all part of a larger conversation that good interims facilitate.
Yeah. I love that, because I think it's just those exercises and that thought direction, it makes you a stronger organization. No matter what you choose, it just seems like, holy moly, what a great exercise, right? And very, very interesting. Well, we don't have a lot of time left. I want to spend, and believe me, we're going to spend more time on this topic, because I do think, to both your points and in your viewpoints, that this is going to start to bubble up more and more. And so what do we need to be thinking about so that it's not a crisis action? One of the things that Jeffrey, you and your team have coming up, and it's really interesting, if I could get you to spend a little bit of time on this, you have an opportunity to learn, or for our communities to learn about interim executive work and what that looks like. Could you share with us this upcoming event?
Certainly. So the upcoming event is actually a complementary orientation to our academy.
Okay,
I'm
cool.
very proud that the academy pretty much represents now a national standard for how does purposeful, profound, methodical, transformational interim leadership occur. I mean, those are all aspirational. They sound great on a brochure. But Julia, the fact of the matter is, how do you turn those thoughts into actual deliverables? And that's why we have a 7-week academy. And it brings diverse people with diverse backgrounds into the myriad of nonprofit environments that exist in this country to leverage those talents to help organizations not figure out what they want to do for their future, to help them own on what they need to do for the future of that community.
Yeah, it's pretty important because I feel like from the other interims that you've trained that I've spoken with, you give them a roadmap on what they should be assessing, like what to be looking at as an interim that comes into an environment. Dare I say, and these are my words, I don't believe they're your words, but it's almost like a forensic approach. Is that true?
It's well, forensic. It's forensic in that interim executives are not consultants or auditing firms.
Okay.
Okay. The forensic work maybe should be done under contract by someone who does that kind of work.
Okay.
Okay. What we want is an interim executive director that is aligning an organization behind its future. And so, whatever work that needs to take place, we're going to work with each other, with other contractors, and with other organizations to bring the information to figure out what that looks like.
I love it.
Interim is the operative, but we are still the CEO of that organization. And we have an obligation to its operational excellence and its community impact while we're there.
Right. Right. Well, and I think that that's such a foundational approach and mindset for the conversation that we've had here today on mergers and acquisitions. Yeah. So check that opportunity out if you're thinking about possibly changing your own the trajectory of your own career, or possibly you're involved in an organization in the future that might need these services. I think it's great to learn about this part of our sector. Because it's still new and being explored, and I just believe it's like one of those big pieces that's going to move us forward in a way that we never could imagine as we navigate this demographic shift, as we navigate the rollover of one big leadership chunk towards another. And so both of you have been riveting, and again, we need to be talking about this more and more. So delighted to welcome back Jeffrey R. Wilcox, CEO and the founder of Interim Executives Academy. You can go to interimexecutivesacademy.com and learn more about all the different things that Jeffrey and his team do across really the world, right, Jeffrey? I mean, it's not just national. You're doing international work, which is pretty exciting. And then Tim Davis, President and Managing Partner of Glick Davis and Associates. Thank you for bringing a realistic tenor and vibe to what this might look like. I really appreciate that, Tim.
I appreciate you having me here today. Thank you.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot more fun to learn more about this. And I propose that we do another episode on how to get ready for an M&A and what are the things that you need to have. How do you have your ducks lined up so that you're not, as Jeffrey said, trying to offload a crisis, because this is a huge, huge piece of our future, I think, with the nonprofit sector. 1.8 million nonprofits registered in America. That's a heck of a lot going on, and not everybody's going to, last throughout these changes. So thank you to both of you for joining us here on the Nonprofit Show. We are joined daily by our amazing partners, and they include Bloomerang, American Nonprofit Academy, Staffing Boutique, JMT Consulting, Interim Executives Academy, Your Part-Time Controller, and Fundraisers Friday. These are the folks that are really joined at the hip with us for nearly now 1,300 episodes as we are entering our 6th year of broadcasting. Thank you so much, gentlemen. You gave me a couple hair on fire moments. That's okay. But yeah, you gave me some new thoughts, and I know that our viewers and listeners will appreciate the message you've delivered today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been a lot of fun. Hey, each and every episode, we end with this mantra, and it means something so different after our conversation today on the Nonprofit Show. And it goes like this: to stay well so you can do well. Thank you, and we'll see you again.